Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And our guest today is Michelle Gloeckler, a real superpower. And I'm making her introduce herself because this is like the fourth time I've tried to do it and I keep tripping up. There's so much next to her name. So Michelle, tell people, who are you?
Thank you, Fawn and Michelle. I'm Michelle Gloeckler, and I spent half of my life, 21 years, at the Hershey Company. And then from there, went on to spend 8 years at Walmart and 3 years as an executive at Academy Sports and Outdoors. And I've spent the last several years defining my next chapters and serving on various public and private boards.
And the thing about Michelle, she is a heavy hitter. Like, these were top jobs. She was even the chairperson of the board of the Network of Executive Women, which is where I met her. And let me tell you, she kicks ass when setting up a tent or building a campfire. So she's got it all there. She's also a mom, splits her time between homes in Florida and Arkansas. And welcome. Thanks so much for doing this, Michelle. I'm so glad you're here. You know, one of my favorite moments with you occurred years ago when we had to pinch hit on a panel. And we had to go in Bentonville, Arkansas. And it was the day that Brenda Barnes, famous CEO, we'll talk about her and other ones, but she'd had her stroke and she was supposed to be the speaker that night. She had a stroke. So I was brought in to moderate a panel, and Michelle was on that panel, and she started talking about something that I never forgot. And I can't wait for her to share this with you. And it was basically that almost everything she needed to know about business, she learned when she was a waitress. So that's my favorite place to start. Tell us that story.
Well, thank you. And it was a pleasure to pinch hit on that panel. And I know you're close to Brenda, and our thoughts are, with that occasion and with her and all the trailblazing that she did. But you're right. I don't remember what the question was that got me started on the waitress story, but in honor of all of our service providers in the past 2 years that have really weathered the storm of the pandemic, my hat's off to them. And for me, I started in high school as soon as I was able to drive as a waitress, and waitressed all through college and then beyond college. And the reason was because I loved it. And I knew that the skills that I was learning would serve me well later. And they're skills like reading people. When you walk up to a table at a fancy restaurant, do they want quick service? Are they going to the theater? Are they doing something else? So there is that ability to read people. It's also where I first started to sell. And afterward, I had a career at Hershey in selling. And well, as retail, you're always selling. But if there was a contest, maybe the chef had bought too much of something, or we had too many desserts, or there was a wine we were phasing out, they'd put me on it, and we would keep track on the little board in the back. And I would win the contest because I just loved to sell. So between reading people, selling, multitasking, which if you have tables at the different phases of their dining experience, you really have to be able to multitask. So I think those are the three key things in business that helped me. And I learned them all as a waitress. I think you also learn other things there. You learn to do quick math in your head. You learn to research your food so you can make recommendations. You learn to do all sorts of things. And those are all things that you need every day in business.
The idea of sales coming out of that is interesting to me because I never thought of that. And that is definitely the starting point of a sales position. A lot of people don't understand how much of a career is sales, whether they're selling or not, because they're advertising themselves, they're having an agenda they want to push across. So what are some of the things that you learned through that and then through a career in sales that would help the people who are listening to be more successful?
Yeah, I think it starts with a strong foundation of building trust. And if you're looking for advice, guidance, recommendations from anybody, it's about building trust. And if you think about social networks today and how people get their information and how people get a lot of followers, it's because they've built trust. They've done their homework, they've done their research, they're honest, and they're accurate. And that builds trust over time. And I think that that is an absolute foundation of building relationships in business. And they can be long-term relationships, Fawn, or they can be really short-term relationships. Like, I trust that wait staff is going to make great recommendations for my party and not just recommend the most expensive things to build the check up to a higher amount. But I think that that's helpful both short-term and long-term.
Yeah. And then as you do that in your career and you're dealing with people, you're building up that trust. You also have to know how to go for the ask. How do you ask?
Well, I think, it's almost like a bank account, and you have built a lot of equity and a lot of deposits in there. And I think wherever you are in your career, very early or, on your way to that blissful space of retirement, it's important to share what you're thinking about and what goals you have, but it's also important to ask for things that you need. Sometimes those things are help, sometimes it's advice, guidance, time off, recommendations. One of the things I was thinking about from asking for help is when folks are new moms. New moms and new dads always have questions that they're uncertain to bring out at work. One of the things while at Walmart that we did is at my home, I hosted a first-time moms network. And that was about the ask, what do you need? And it was one of the easiest things to host, because talk about something, that they have in common and they just want to ask each other about. So I think you're right. The ask is a huge part of it, whether it's something you're experiencing in your personal life or something at work. You've got to ask for help. You've got to ask for advice. And I think the personal recommendations are so much more powerful than the things that you see in your social media feed, because they're built on trust.
Well, I appreciate the story. I know that I think it's very relatable in terms of being effective at business. And I love the fact that you brought up the sales piece, because I think that people don't realize how critical that is in terms of success. I think we call it things like influence if we're using corporate speak, like we call it influence. But the way you influence is you're uncovering needs. You're also positioning so it's a value add for the person across the table. And those are things that are so embedded in the sales process that if you're in your career and maybe you're an analyst or a manager and you're trying to build out those skill sets, figuring out a way to get some basic selling skills, I think would be incredibly beneficial. So I love that you brought that up, Michelle.
Yeah, I think, you're right. It's often called different things, influence and otherwise. Being a Hershey sales rep, I had good classic sales training with the open proposal close. But I think today's selling environment is about selling ideas, selling leadership, selling yourself, as you mentioned, selling the trust in yourself, selling, kind of faith and confidence that people have in you getting the job done. So I think that selling is a big, big part of that. But I think it's also a big part of leadership, because if you can't sell your vision to your team or your company or your organization, how do you get followers? And a leader without followers isn't going to go that far. And, you've got to make good on your promises, and you have to do the things that you say you're going to do.
Was leadership real natural for you?
I think I studied it in school and loved it. And then I think I probably Fawn and Michelle, I spent my early career years watching, observing, in learning like traits and characteristics that I found to be great in leaders and that I would want to tuck away in my memory bank and have those for future. I knew that someday I wanted to be a leader of people because I do like influencing, and I like defining the path, and I like celebrating with the team. To me, celebrating the accomplishments is the best part of leadership, or giving credit to the team. So I think I've spent my early years watching, learning, noting, and then spent the rest of my career putting it into practice and developing my own leadership style.
What were the things that you watched and learned that hit you the hardest as the greatest impact?
Yeah, well, it was probably the things on what not to do that had the longest lasting impact. Like,
Right.
don't,
Is that it? I hear this again and again. I think the same
Yeah.
thing. No greater teacher than a horrible boss.
because it hurts. It really hurts when when your leader takes credit for something that you or your team did. That's really painful, and it doesn't build that relationship. It doesn't make you want to run through a wall for that leader. And as I reflect back on good leaders that I've either worked for or watched or observed, you want to run through a wall for them. You want to go the extra mile, do the extra, and you want to communicate that. And even the bad news, bad news doesn't get better with age. It's not like fine wine. So it's about communicating and course correcting. But yeah, I learned a lot of what not to do from leaders that I thought, that's just not my favorite.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience. Yours too, Michelle.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to dig into something else you mentioned. You talk about celebrating, right? So what did you find was an effective way to celebrate successes? Because I know there's some of that school of thought of wait until the project's over and then you celebrate. There's the milestone celebration. I'd love to hear what you found was effective in keeping a team motivated around how to celebrate progress.
Yeah, I like to celebrate small steps and wins throughout. And I like to do it with personal names. And that was just because that's what I liked. Hey, Michelle, great job on that. Could be as simple as that. It's free. It doesn't take a lot of time. But what I've learned since then is watching my kids. I have two boys, they're 21 and 25, 22 and 25. And when they get an accolade, an email or something from their manager, they send it to me. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah.
Like, that matters. And to somebody so earlier in their career, one of the things I wish I would have known early on is how much that matters, because I would have doubled up on it. It just calling somebody by name, celebrating a small milestone, saying great job, the most cost-effective way of building confidence, building your team, building capabilities. And by the same token, you praise in public and you kind of offer other guidance in private, but you have to do both. So it's not just you're a cheerleader, rah, rah, all the time, but you've got some real feedback that's valuable, constructive, and actionable. And you do that on the side, but that is also an investment in them. And that's one of the things I enjoyed from leaders and mentors that I had was, they would tell me, yeah, that was good, maybe okay, would be better if. And that was a really nice way to give feedback, or just a flat out, you missed the mark on that one. And here's what we'll work on so that doesn't happen again. Or here's an assignment for you. Watch 4 other people in a similar situation and figure out what they do. And, make improvements all the time.
Yeah, I love here's what you did really well, and this would make it even better. That's starting from a place of it was positive. But I used to crack up. I had a former boss, but I would get how do you think you did? And I was like, dang it. Oh, God, that's going to be he's got constructive feedback for me. That lead in was always the sign of, uh-oh, buckle up. Here we go. What did I do?
But see, that's an investment in you. That person cared enough. Even if you would have liked it to start out differently, to me, that's still an investment in you. And it's easier not to say it. It's easier just to let it pass and, she'll figure it out on her own. But somebody who takes the time to say, here's something to think about in whatever way is appropriate. Or, it's like a coach in sports, a coach in sports that doesn't correct your swing or, correct your shot or your follow through is missing a chance every time to be a coach. And I think leaders are coaches.
You notice a lot of people are so afraid to get criticism. And how do you get any better if you don't get that feedback? I mean, I think you evaluate it and see what's their motive. And if it's genuine, that's coaching.
Yeah, I agree. And coaching makes it, sound less intimidating, or even words like constructive feedback. I'm fine, bring that on. And by the way, whether you're year 1 through 5 in your career or whether you're beyond your career and doing other things, I'm still accepting, asking for feedback, coaching, because the things that I'm doing now are new and different. And if you're going to go through your career and you're going to have different jobs, different locations, different companies, different team members, you have to always accept that little bit of coaching because somebody else can see it more clearly than you in the heat of the moment, especially.
I had a friend who had a performance review that was meeting expectations. By the time she was done, she says, well, if that's the way you feel, and she quit. And it wasn't a situation where she needed to quit. And I think we have to learn to take that a little bit. So what did you ever have a real nightmare boss?
I think I've had bosses that I learned a lot from that had a leadership style that I wasn't fond of. And
Is that the diplomatic way, or was it?
No, so I'll be specific without names. Things that make me crazy are bosses that complicate everything. And I'm straightforward. I have a bias toward action. I can do the research, but to a certain point, I'm done and I gotta move and I gotta go. And things that would drive me crazy in my personal style are bosses who would complicate things more necessarily than they were, or that wouldn't allow action or a decision. And I'm humble enough to say, I made a decision, I went this way, I should have gone this way, I'll course correct. No big deal. Like we got to keep it moving. But yeah, I think you learn a lot from, what holds the business back. And that's kind of my proxy for a good boss or not. I can deal with a lot of different styles. I've worked for a lot of different people, men, women, doesn't really matter, older, younger. I can deal with style differences. What I really struggle with is when that obstructs the progress of the business. And I get it, not everybody sees it the same way. And, everybody wants to pursue their goals for the business. So I understand that, but you've got to be a champion for your business. And then you have to settle in and know where the team's going and go together.
That's good leadership advice. What about for employees? What makes an employee stand out? What impresses you and what turns you off?
Okay, so my gauge for like an employee that I think is adding a ton of value is when you see them on your calendar for that day for a 30-minute one-on-one or a touch base or something, and you're like, yes, super excited. This is going to be an excellent 30 minutes. We're going to make progress. I'm going to learn something. So-and-so is going to learn something. And at the end of it, we're going to be exhilarated and pumped up. Versus that person you see on your calendar where you're like, oh, and Michelle, I can see by Michelle's face, she's like, yeah, oh, that's going to be a drain. And I'm going to walk out of there with less energy than I had when I walked in. So I personally enjoy surrounding myself with people not who are like-minded or not who think and have the same experiences that I do, but are really bright, action-oriented, and bring energy to the room versus sucking it out of me as an individual or the room. So that's how you want to surround yourself with those kind of employees. I also love people with a ton of initiative that can take a nugget of something and do a way better job than I ever could at making it happen. To me, that's like, I have high praise and, want to invest in those type of team members.
I know I would always hire for initiative over any other quality would be the first thing. They don't have to be an expert. And I think it's important though for people to know that. Or I love the energy conversation because people worry so much about, do they have the technical expertise to do the job? And that's oftentimes not really the most valuable asset to bring to the table.
I think, and you know, there's so many entrepreneurial companies now that are doing things that had never been done before, whether in technology or otherwise. And we had the opportunity at Walmart to do a lot of new and groundbreaking things. And we would have the idea and maybe make the commitment that we're going to do this, having no path. And when you surround that with people with that initiative, problem solving, drive, run through a wall, it's amazing what you can accomplish. I mean, we just had so many things that the people just surprised us on how awesome and excellent, you know, an initiative, an idea could become. I think that's, you know, working with startup businesses and entrepreneurs, that's kind of the flavor that you get when you're in those types of companies. I think it's really healthy.
Yeah. So throughout your career, when you look back, what do you think was your greatest initiative that you pulled off that you didn't expect? And then let's have some examples of things where you think you may have flopped.
Oh, sure. Definitely. We'll start with a positive though, right?
Yes.
So as I look back, and this is recent because I saw an article this week that talked about the Walmart open call for US manufacturing, the 9th annual. That was something that was a dream, and it was probably, so it was obviously 9 years ago, but that was something that a small team and I worked on. And it was about bringing suppliers who are making US made goods to the merchants at Walmart and setting them up together, and also giving those folks resources around reshoring manufacturing in the US, tying in with, you know, government incentives and programs. So a really big scale driven program that was an idea. That first open call, we had over 800 meetings with new to Walmart suppliers and just like all the buyers there. And the energy around that day was amazing. And you know, when you talk about what are your favorite days, that was one of my best and most favorite days for 2 reasons. One, I saw us break through to make Walmart an easier place to do business with, but we also made a difference in those people's lives that had a business idea and that were making it in the US. So that's good for the US economy. But then just this week, when I saw the article, it reinforced to me that that was a big deal because it is an event that is sustained, an annual event every year for 9 years. So in the moment you think it's big, but almost 10 years later, it's still big. And I take a little bit of ownership and pride in that. And I'm really, really thrilled for the US manufacturing community and all the entrepreneurs that have a chance to get in there and pitch their products.
Okay, now the flops.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, just lots of different things. And whether it's, you know, making a bad item decision, which happens, or, you know, supporting your team and challenging them. Okay, I'll give you a specific one. This is funny. You know, I had a buyer who I wanted to challenge him to think bigger. So he had what I thought was a great item, and he had good research behind it, and there was nothing like it in the market. And I said, well, how many are you going to buy?
What was the item?
It was a watermelon knife. It had a green handle. I still have one. I could bring it and show you, but the blade was big enough to cut a watermelon. It looked like a watermelon colors. It was great. I said, well, how many watermelons do you think we sell at Walmart? He's like, I have no idea. I said, well, call the produce buyer. Here's what you were going to buy, small. We're going to merchandise them in produce, working in potential, you know, with the produce buyer. But like, buy 1 million of them. Like, let's do something big. Let's just bring it up. Can they produce them? Yeah. Well, okay. So he's like, okay, I've done the research. I'm going to show her. And he bought 1,000,000 of them because I said, hey, if it's a problem, I'll cover it. No problem. I'll take the blame for it. So he's like, okay, I'm going to show her. He bought 1,000,000 of them, and we probably still have them.
Oh no. What was the
Yeah.
problem?
Well, we bought way too many of them. And, while we did sell a lot of watermelons, not every watermelon needed a knife. So, I kind of get that. But we ended up, we priced him here, we marked him down, we had him the next year. I think by the third year, we were buying them again. But it was a bad idea. And another one, and this was also at Walmart when I first got there, and I was really trying to build my reputation, a lot of consumer research. I knew the category well, thought I made a good informed decision based on the consumer research, which was around the front end checkout. And not just having candy, gum, and mints there, but having some better for you healthy snacks. This was in 2009. And at that time, better for you healthy snacks weren't as good as they are today. Yeah, these are like, Rice Krispie treats, but sorry, Kellogg's, but nonetheless, we put a lot of better for you items in because the consumer said, yes, I want better for you items. I want to see that in the assortment. They don't want to buy them. So so our movement, our business was really, it was substantially lower than our forecast and our plan. And we actually had to do an off-cycle swap, which you never want to do because you're like taking twice the store labor. Usually you do it once every 3 months or every 6 months. And we had to do an off-cycle swap and put, some other stuff back in. Expensive. And then we had to mark down the stuff that didn't sell. So yeah, lots of scale-driven mistakes. If you do something like that, Fawn, you're really supposed to test it first.
I was just going to say, let's unpack this a little bit because I think a lot of people are making a decision. They're making a data-driven decision. I mean, right. You believed based on what you knew and you missed something. How do you deal with that? How do you confront it? How do you grow from it and protect your brand and reputation? I'd love to hear just whether it's thoughts of that experience with you or as you've led people and that reported to you that found themselves in that situation, because people are so afraid of that failure.
Yeah, I think step one is create an environment where failure is okay and small. So
not 1 billion watermelon nuts.
Right. That's back to, we should have tested that, test and learn, move fast, course correct, make it small. One of the processes at Walmart that was always really helpful is, it's a COE, a correction of errors, where you look back on anything that you do, any big seasonal program, whatever, and you do a correction of errors. And I think this is very common in business. People kind of go, here's what worked, here's what didn't, whatever the case may be. But I think that's how you get better over time. But I would discourage that environment of that fear and failure. I think fast failure at a small scale is really healthy. I mean, they have in the IT world, they call that agile.
Agile,
yeah. You're trying things, you're moving, you're kind of like assessing, you're making refinements. And I love that style for progress. I think it's motivating because a failure, no matter if you're forgiven or somebody else takes the blame, it's still personal. I had one of the, I know you like to ask about, the advice that you've been given. Somebody gave me the advice. And so keep in mind, I joined Walmart when I had spent 21 years at Hershey. So I was kind of a known commodity at Hershey. They knew my style, my penchant for success, whatever. So I was trying to build that quickly, being new. And somebody gave me the advice, it was Lee Scott gave me the advice. He said, no matter what happens, give all the credit to your team and the individuals around you. And be quick to step up and take the blame. And I was like, well, gosh, how am I going to build my name and reputation and personal equity if I'm always giving credit? I said, I'm new here. I've only ever been one other place and I was there for 21 years. I was kind of a known entity. How do I do that here? And he's like, trust me. That is how you do it here. You're a selfless, humble servant leader. That's who we are. And that's what makes success at this company. Companies are different, but that's our style here. To me, that was just great advice that was, to me, a puzzle. But he also said, trust me, that's how you do it here.
Wow. So did you, in some of these instances, did you get in trouble? I just wonder what trouble looks like in the senior offices.
Trouble. So I think that the more trouble is when you're not able to admit that you've made a mistake. You're not humble enough. So you get married to your own idea forever and ever and ever. And you're not humble enough to say, I blew it, bad idea. Here's what I'm doing. Yep, we lost this. I'm over it. We're moving on. You got to always move on. And, let somebody else make the decision if that hurdle and that loss was big enough to make a change. But to me, I wasn't going to, wring my hands and lose sleep over it, because if you do that, and, if everyone who makes a mistake doesn't get to show up to make another one, well, what kind of environment is that? That's really an environment of fear and slow progress.
Wow. So you just wouldn't even think that Walmart would be as touchy-feely as that sounds. Like it's understanding as that.
Yeah.
What made you want to leave that company?
So I wanted an opportunity. I wanted to be a chief merchant. I wanted to fill out my portfolio. I wanted to work with brands that weren't available at Walmart. I had an opportunity to be a chief merchant at a sporting goods operation that was in Texas. My kids were really excited about that. And it was the right time. I think I had spent 8 years at Walmart, had been incredibly successful and rewarded, and got to do scale-driven things that were just a blessing. But I was really ready to kind of round out my own portfolio, get footwear experience, apparel experience, work with folks like Nike, Columbia, Adidas, and really just kind of go through the next chapter. It was the right location, the right categories, and it was a risk, but it was something that I had great support from my family to do.
It's obvious, Michelle, you have very much a growth mindset and you were hungry to learn something new. And I think there's a perception, right, that there's a certain place in the career where, you just sit back and you bask in the glow of all that and, sit on the throne. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your feelings around growth and learning.
Yeah, Michelle, you're right. That's an excellent observation. I would say I'm a lifelong learner. And I do like to challenge myself with different things. And I'm still doing that today. I haven't worked, full time since 2019, but I'm continuing to learn, grow, do new things. And to me, I'm also learning to relax and fill my time with other things too, which is, that's also learning and growing. But I'm super committed to growth, and it's kind of how you spend your time, where you get your energy. I get my energy from doing new things, from surrounding myself with people that, do things bigger, bolder, and that are smarter than me.
I had an old mentor, or former mentor, that told me, you should always look for things, say yes to things that are 50% you're confident in and 50% you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always the best places to go and the best places to lean. And it's just been really great advice.
Yeah, I think that is great advice.
Do you feel like you want to go back to work ever?
I am working. I'm just not working full time. So,
but I mean, into the office, diving in all the way in. I'm not saying you're not working. I mean, that list of what you're doing is massive and impressive. And
it, it keeps me challenged. It keeps me growing. So as far as immersing myself in one thing and, going ocean deep, I would say no. I'm really enjoying the breadth of the work and the way I spend my time now. And I'm also spending more time helping others. And that to me is really satisfying. You know, Fawn, like you mentioned from, you know, the days of Network of Executive Women and just the, you know, the different commitments that we've both made to helping advance women and networking and, you know, just doing things that invest in others. I find today what I want to do are things that make a difference, bring energy and satisfaction. And I like to keep it simple. It's like we talked about, you know, those bosses that make the simple complex. I'm trying to make this next phase simple and meaningful.
And fun. I love that about you, is you're fun and you're not afraid, you know, to get dirty and have fun. That's what makes you a great friend. So
How
when
can you tell the tent story though after that?
wait, the what? She's
Getting dirty. You always talk about the tent story. I feel like when you talk about getting dirty, have fun, you're like you're teasing us with.
Oh, it's not really a story. I said to Michelle, and Shelley Broader, who was on this program before, she was CEO of Chico's FAS. And I was saying that you guys want to go camping because we don't all live that far from each other. And they're like, yeah. And I mean, in a tent, and they're like, yeah. And Gloeckler here, like, is a pro at camping. She just
Fire builder.
Yeah, I mean, but she had it down, and she brought, you know, little gifts for all of us, like, you know, little raincoats, perfectly timed for those and everything. And Shelley and they made our charcuterie trays. And like, if you knew what a mess I am when I camp, you know, I kept my tent zipped so nobody could see it, and theirs were so perfectly organized. Is that because you're senior executives? Is that like a senior executive kind of tent?
No, it was because we were determined to succeed at something that neither of us had done since childhood. So it was about preparation. It was about research. And when I picked Shelley up, I know she wouldn't mind me sharing this, her entire foyer was filled with stuff. And she's like, we're going for 2 weeks, right? 2 days, 2 days. But we weren't going to fail. We were going to be prepared for everything. And we were going to be downright impressive.
Okay, wait a minute. So you were type A-ing a camping trip? I had no idea about this. You know, I just throw a bunch of crap in and I hope I have the right stuff.
Oh, yeah. Planning, preparation, research.
They had to measure up with you. You're like the pro, Fawn. Like, I mean, there's pressure.
Right.
No, but that kind of.
This is awesome.
It leads to a pretty good question because, you know, y'all are transitioning. You are the most really spot on, determined person on getting on boards that I've seen of the people that have moved on. And Michelle, you're younger than a lot of people that when they retired. So we don't want those who are just listening to think that Granny's on the line here. She's not. she's but you made up your mind. Basically, you were going to project manage and type A yourself into some pretty significant board positions, and other people look to you as the model because you did it. Part of that is because you were able to leverage your network. And this is, you know, a lot of people listening to this, I have no interest in ever being on a board. I mean, most of us would love to be on a board because we'd like the paycheck, but we're not going to do it and we're not going to get it. So that's their thing. But that is such a good example of getting what you want and being determined. And just tell us a little about how you did that.
Yeah, I will say it wasn't easy. And I think I have a good resume of consumer packaged goods, retail, executive position, scale, job, breadth. So I have confidence in what I bring to a boardroom. It wasn't easy. It also, Fawn, wasn't easy for me to call upon my network because I just wasn't fond of asking for favors or connections.
Okay, what is that though? What is that? You have been doing favors for people since the beginning, but why is this? And this is common all the time. I see women all the time who do for others and are reluctant to ask for a favor.
Well, I ended up asking. I asked men, I asked women, I asked acquaintances, I asked mentors. And it wasn't even, well, it was some asks. I even asked people that I had only met like, once. And here's what I did. So I called everybody that I really have a good relationship, and I just told them what I was pursuing so that they would know. And that was an easy ask. Keep me in mind as you network, because the other thing is when people call you, you want to make referrals, you want to help. So I did that. That was pretty easy. But then what I was doing, as you said, kind of type A-ing my search, I was going through companies that I admired and would like to serve on. And then I would go through their executive team and their board. And if there was somebody that I had crossed paths with, I would reach out to them and just say, hey, just giving you a quick update. Hope all is well. Here's the space I'm in and here's what I'm pursuing. And I think, maybe I got maybe 20% hit rate on those, but everybody to a fault said, happy to help, glad you reached out. So for everybody out there that you said, what is it with everybody? Go ahead and do it. It's not easy. They're super happy to help. And even if it's been 10 years since you've talked to them, it's an okay thing to do. And with LinkedIn, you can really see everybody's background, and it's just really easy to message folks. So I would say for that limited group that wants to pursue that, use your easy, close network, use your extended network, and hit it with some initiative, like define your own path. And I wasn't well networked in the recruiter system because, as we've said, I've only ever worked at Hershey, Walmart, and Academy. So I wasn't, known among the big recruiting agencies. And personally, I found that most of them, not all, but most of them wanted to place me in full-time roles because that's a much bigger, that's a much bigger get for them.
Right.
So I think, the network has been the most fruitful, and kind of pursuing your own path takes initiative. I also made some mistakes. And, they're funny stories where I thought I was going to have a real narrow place where I want to spend my time and energy on modern food, health and wellness, make the world a better place, make healthy food more accessible. And what I found is there were too many competing priorities, and I needed to spread that out a little bit. So it's like, okay, so I don't want just all companies that look like this. I need to go a little bit broader, because they were like, well, if you're going to do this one, you can't do that one, etc. So I had to probably start and restart. I had one that one of my other boards wasn't fond of. And so, they said, no, we don't recommend you do that one. And then I had another one that said, well, if you do this, you can't do any alcohol, cannabis, or anything else. Okay, so, I'm just trying to manage and navigate that. Where I am today, which is 3 years later, I think I have a rewarding and fulfilling portfolio of 3 public and 1 private. I'm busy enough. And I still have time to do other things that bring me energy and that I think make a difference. By the way, I had a call with the woman you introduced me to, Leslie, who's doing her bedding piece. I had a call with her earlier today. So that kind of stuff is great. I love doing that, love networking. But for me, I would say it's probably taken a good 3 years. I'm learning. I have people investing me. I have a couple chairmen actually that are really investing me in teaching me how to be a great board member, teaching me how to be a committee lead. I'm doing a lot of research, reading, and seminars kind of on my own time, just to be the best at it that I can possibly be, and to add value to the companies and the shareholders.
Wow, Michelle, this has been just super valuable and informative. I'm so excited for you to be here today. I think there's a couple of things that kind of 3 big takeaways that I got out of our conversation. And the first was just for our listeners, I think everything has to be built on a foundation of trust. And that's whether you're a leader, salesperson, partner, whatever it is trust is critical. So I thank you for sharing that. But you also that led into a lot of leadership skills. And I think two things that were big takeaways there were about the importance of being a servant leader. So making sure people feel valued, celebrating successes, and the more you can invest in them, the more it benefits you. So don't put yourself first, put them first, and you'll see you achieve the things that are important to you. And finally, I think you're just a great example of pursuing happiness, because you obviously there's so many things that you're wanting to do. And throughout your career, there's been a consistent theme of learning, pursuing things, taking the initiative to learn, surrounding yourself with people that are your coaches, smarter than you, recognizing, right, that you really have to lean on your network. And then finally, openness to experiment and try things. And I think just if our listeners are thinking about no matter where they are in their journey, I mean, those are just solid takeaways for them to think about how they can apply within their own world and their own life. So just thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys always do a great job of pulling out specific examples, because a lot of times you hear speakers or panelists and it's kind of like the corporate speak or, just the canned answers. And I think the most valuable things come from when people are willing to share specific examples of successes or failures or learning. And you both do a fantastic job in an unassuming and very friendly, removing all of the barriers and fear. You do that in a fantastic way that makes people comfortable. And I think it makes what you're sharing more valuable, because it's not just, it's somebody's real experience that they're willing to share. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And, the one thing we didn't get to, which we may, and when we do our after show, I don't want people thinking you're all business. Your family is so important to you. And that is a beautiful thing that we didn't get to, but she did find a way to make choices. And we want to hear more about that. So, Michelle, thank you for joining us. And we really appreciate you.
Thank you both.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Von Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.